we're gonna find you. We'll never mind you. We'll drag you home and then we'll organ grind you. Oh, you'll be hurting.
Applause for just being so awesome. And hopefully, when we come back at around the same time next year, you guys will come out and have fun with us again. But before we get started to what everybody is here for, I'm assuming everybody's here for the Fright Night panel, right? You got that right? All right. You know, we just wanted to maybe say a few words to it, because when we started putting together the Chicago show, it was one of the first ideas we had, is to do a Fright Night reunion. It's one of our favorite films. I know for Rick it's probably more so than me, but you know, it's a film that, you know, we both grew up with, and we just grew up loving. And you know, it was one of those that, you know, going into the sort of mom and pop VHS stores with the fantastic cover art and all the other sort of that aisle that mom kept us away from, so we wouldn't, you know, see anything too impressionable. It was always one that we sort of just rented time and time again and wore out until the tape snapped. And just having the opportunity to do this particular reunion and have these particular actors and actresses come out for something we're doing is just mind-blowing. I mean, we're just as floored as you guys are to have met them. And I mean, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but you know, this one is particularly sweet for us. This one is particularly rewarding for us, and we're beyond floored to be able to be here introducing you guys.
I just want to say I had a brief conversation with Chris Sarandon, and everything you would ever want to hear about them in terms of the filming and how well they get along and why it has that magical vibe, it's all true. You guys are in for a treat with this panel, because these guys truly care about each other. They're great actors, and that film was just so impressionable in my youth, and I'm just so happy to see you guys all here to enjoy this, and I'm looking forward to the show, so I'll pass it back.
Oh, sorry, we were out late last night too. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so we're going to turn it over to somebody a little bit more charismatic than we are, a little bit better spoken. Ladies and gentlemen, no, not Harry Bean. Go ahead and give a really warm welcome, Mr. William Ragsdale, Miss Amanda Bearse, Mr. Jonathan Stark, Mr. Geoffreys, and Mr. Chris Sarandon. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, get 2 mics. Okay. All right, guys, welcome for coming. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for skipping church, guys.
He said I was more well-spoken than him, but he's totally wrong. Now, what about Fright Night makes it stand out above other vampire films?
Us. I think we're all in agreement that it was a lovely combination of state-of-the-art effects at the time, Richard Evans' group, handcrafted, no CGI of course, as well as the humanity of the script, the characters. There was a lot of funny, and then there was a lot of scary, so I think it was a pretty good blend.
In my mind, too, you must give credit to Tom Holland, who wrote what I thought was one of the best scripts, at least at that time, that I'd read in a long time. Brilliantly crafted, beautifully constructed. And then Tom's execution of it as a director. I met with him at one point to talk about the movie, and he literally sat down and described every shot of the movie, the way he was going to shoot it. First time director, by the way. So let's give Tom props.
We also had about 2 weeks of rehearsal time, which you don't get for movies at all anymore. And we got to really know each other. Tom, I believe, taped off basically the sets where we were doing stuff, and Chris and I kind of wrote a biography of the two characters and everything like that. So that helps a lot in kind of the chemistry. And plus, it was just always a joy to work with all these people. I would always be laughing so hard when I was working with them, and then Tom would, of course, say, "Okay, come on, guys, we got to go," and so you have to get scary. But it was just always fun working with everybody.
Yeah, I agree with what everyone said so far, and the bottom line is, I think we all had our hearts in it, and that was the current running through the whole shooting, and making a movie is incredibly technical, and especially a horror movie. But I think everyone was on the same page, and it showed in the end product.
Yeah, I guess I would say that, agreeing with everyone, that the story was really so strong, and everybody was just almost perfect for their roles, and it hadn't been done in a while. It was the first time that the vampire thing had been revisited in a while. It's the first time it had been updated quite like that, and also I think something that's different from the way it is usually done today is there was a genuine innocence about it too, that sort of allowed everybody in. You didn't have to buy in too much of, you didn't have to be convinced of teenage awkwardness or, a lonely guy, a guy who'd been alive too long and just kind of worn out with it, and I don't know. It was very human, a human vampire story.
I think one of the things that made it unique was that all the characters knew the rules of vampires, and they would reference like other vampire films and the lore of vampires from movies.
Well, that's Robbie too.
No. Essentially, one of the great strokes of not luck, Tom's casting, he cast Roddy McDowall. Now, Roddy is a kind of repository of Hollywood history. And so you had, whether you were aware of it or not, I think, as a fan, when you watched the movie, we were aware of it always on the set, that we were working with somebody who went back from the time of his childhood forward, all through various extraordinary periods of Hollywood history. We would hear the stories on the set from Roddy. And he was also the embodiment of the has-been movie star turned vampire killer, quote unquote, television host, which is a great conceit in my mind, or a brilliant idea of Tom's, to create this character who was this sort of down on his luck, failed vampire killer who has to really do it in real life. And also, as Bill mentioned, the conventions of the vampire movie were faithfully followed, but then there were always little tweaks in the conventions. Jerry saying to Peter Vincent, "You have to have faith in order for the cross to work." There were always little kind of turning on their heads, these conventions, which gave the movie a kind of uniqueness in my mind. Was that what you were thinking?
Exactly.
Anyone else want to speak on that, or Roddy?
Roddy was a great guy to be around because he was generous, he was approachable, he was mischievous, he was. Is it mischievous?
Or mischievous?
Or mischievous. I think you need to check the spelling on that. So, whatever he was great fun to be around, and it was like, as much as that movie was a sort of an homage, am I saying that correctly, to the old Hammer films and all of that stuff. It was kind of like being in one of those movies, one of those old Hammer movies, and that was just fun,
Well, because one of the things that Tom loves those movies, and you could tell that there was an affection for the genre. He was convinced that the genre had been killed by movies that had over-satirized things like Love at First Bite, which was sort of at the tail end of that period where vampire movies were being made fun of. And so he was determined to put humor in the movie and have fun with the conventions, but not make fun of them. And that's a very important distinction when you're making a movie like that, and that is to walk that line so that the audience is still involved, and you don't alienate the audience by going, oh look, we're just making fun of everything, when we weren't.
Any questions from the audience? Someone here.
Please.
You guys can, here we go. Right here.
Okay, so you're all known for Fright Night. What have you done as actors that you would like us to know to go see that's not Fright Night?
Did everybody hear their question?
No.
What roles have we?
Okay, so I want to know what they've done that they feel a connection to that's not Fright Night that we should all go see.
I've been behind the camera for over 2 decades. Besides Fright Night, which has its lovely following of fans, Married with Children is probably what I'm known for. Thank you. It was a good gig, but they're the ones, for those of you who haven't stopped by to say hi, they're the ones that gave me my second career, the producers of Married with Children. So I directed 6 seasons of that series and then went on to do just hundreds of episodes of what's multi-camera production. When reality programming and single camera half hour has taken over, there's not a lot of multi-camera production. A lot of it's going on at the Disney Channel and Nickelodeon, and so that's sort of old home week for me, working over there. And I've also, my main production was my daughter Zoe, and so actually I kind of went sort of into a part-time working phase so that I could grow her or she could grow me.
You're talking about since Fright Night?
Anything that you've done that you think is maybe underrated?
Anything I've done, boy, oh boy. Well, I've been doing a lot of, I moved back to New York about in '06, and I've done a lot of theater in New York, some of which has actually shown on television. I've done 2 productions, one musical called The Light in the Piazza, which was a great performance on PBS. A production of Cyrano de Bergerac with Kevin Kline that was also on PBS. I've done a couple of off-Broadway plays. I'm directing an off-Broadway play now. It's not in production, but we're on our way. As well as a bunch of independent movies, one of which is coming out, I think, in the spring, East of Arcadia, it's called. And another one that's going into production sometime in the winter, I hope. So, you know, we keep busy, we try.
Yeah, I did some theater in New York when I first started, and you know, when you're working on a play, it's pretty intense, and then you're out on stage for 2 hours, and that, you know, my I guess fondest memories are from some of the shows that I did there, and you know, this movie. I mean, I worked on, you know, a couple other things on TV and in film, but you know, it just I feel a real personal connection to these guys, as well as to the stuff I did in New York. It's all good.
Can I just Oscar nomination, Tony nomination, so. Here we go. Oh yes, I'm sorry. Emmy win.
No, after Fright Night, I just went into a deep depression, and it's been pretty much downhill. No, I did a movie called House 2, and I did a movie called Project X with Matthew Broderick, and then I started writing, and I wrote on Cheers, and I wrote the coming out episode of Ellen, and I created a show called According to Jim with Jim Belushi, and so I'm writing now, and I love that. So,
And you're very good at it. I've just been knocking around for the past 25 years, doing the same thing. Do a lot of TV mostly now. I do like guest spots and stuff, but I just did a play. Did The Woman in Black theater in Arkansas, and Mannequin 2, I'm sure all of you. No, please. I'm not sure. I knew I was nominated for something for that, but I can't remember exactly what it was. And but it's all good. Yeah, as Chris said, you know, you stay busy and you keep going, and and it's fun. It's fun to still be around and doing it, still kind of be involved in show business, which is good.
William mentioned the rehearsals. Do you have the rehearsals did that help build the chemistry with all of you guys, and do you have any particular stories?
Yeah, we, as Chris said, you never get to rehearse in movies. Usually you show up and you do it,
I said
Oh, you said that? Okay, as someone said. And what we did, we got to shoot on our lot. I mean, we got to rehearse on the lot that we were shooting on. They taped it all out. They taped out the rooms so you knew exactly the space you had to work in, which is like a theater thing, which is like something you're going to be doing for a long, long time. And it really, it solidified not only the relationships, but, the spatial identity and the sense of place. And that was great. I don't even know how he managed that, how Tom would manage to make that happen.
By paying us minimum salaries.
Well, and that being said, a lot of us were really beginning our careers with this film. And so that's what's also so wondrous about being here with you today, these many years later, is that we really were not this gentleman. He had already been nominated for an Oscar. Was that your first show? Dog Day Afternoon? If you have never seen this film, Netflix, it is an amazing film as well as a remarkable performance. But I think we didn't really even understand the luxury of what was happening at the time. Exactly, and a lot of us did come from theater, so it was a natural process and a real gift for us to be able to work that way.
Yeah, it's interesting because the only other time that I've done that kind of rehearsal period was for Sidney Lumet on Dog Day. Yeah, that he used to do that. He would take 2 weeks and all the actors would get together and you would literally rehearse it like a play so that when you went in to the actual scene on the set, there were no surprises except for the fact that in our case, there was a lot of smoke. And also the rehearsal process was really interesting too because Tom Holland had been an actor and so he welcomed contribution from everybody. If you had an idea, he encouraged everybody to write a biography of their character, what the background was, and if you had an idea that could somehow enhance what was going on in the movie, then he would gladly accept it. He was very collaborative in that respect. So it made you feel like that you were part of the process. I know that personally, in my case, I had a couple of ideas that I wanted to incorporate. One of them was that I thought it would be interesting to have had some sort of a relationship in Jerry's past that Amy looked like a woman that he was in love with many centuries ago. And so Tom said, oh, great. And he went to the props people and had them do a portrait, and the portrait shows up in one of the scenes, if you recall. I also, because how do you do a biography of a vampire? It takes too long. So I thought, well, let me look in other places, and I started checking out bats. Thinking that might give me some clue as to some sort of a character quirk, and discovered that most bats, 90% of bats, are not vampire bats. They're fruit bats. And I thought, so I said to Tom, what if he's got some fruit bat in his genealogy and likes to eat fruit? And so Tom thought it was a great idea, and as you all know, it became part of the movie.
And the second one also, he did that. He ate through the second remake.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Those little details, do you think that helps flesh out a film?
Oh, absolutely. It gives it texture. It gives it a sense that you've been there before, but you haven't. That you're surprised. There are little surprises, and surprises are always fun.
Yeah, and it's just kind of reality. I mean, people eat apples. That's life.
But it was giving you a human side to his character, because that's, to me, is why vampires were my favorite monster prior to doing this film, because of the humanity of the monster. And Chris brought so much of that to the film. And then I'm just going to do a little side note. My very first job was that same year. I just moved to LA, and I had a one-day, it was my very first time on a movie set. I had a one-day, it was almost a pre-production day for a movie called Protocol. And I had come from a soap opera in New York, was my first job. And so through a friend who was an assistant casting somebody, whatever, they needed a scene of a soap opera to be playing on a television set that Goldie Hawn, who was the female lead of the movie, Chris was the male lead, a romantic comedy. And so I filmed this little kind of soap opera scene that was literally shown on the film that long, but it gave Goldie Hawn a funny moment that opened early in the film. And I heard that Chris, whose work I had so respected, was a part of the film. And then lo and behold, not that, a few months later, I end up playing the female lead opposite him. And I just have to say, that, because I say this about Roddy, he treated us in such a lovely manner, these young baby actors, and so did this man. He treated me as if I had the stature of a movie star like Goldie Hawn. And that, you can't imagine how helpful that is with the vulnerability of all that gets incorporated in a big production. And, human spirits, we're human beings, we're putting ourselves out there, and to be treated so, with such equal respect and stature, was such a comforting and opening way to work. And so thank you for that. You didn't know that story?
We have a word for that where I come from, pshaw.
You were about to say something.
Oh, I was just going to say, all the great things on the set. Chris had mentioned the smoke. The smoke and the full eye contacts made life miserable for most of us. I don't know if you had the contacts, but you would literally be you had these little things called cookies, and they would just make the smoke all day long, because if you were in the house doing something. And I remember coming home and blowing my nose and going, what the hell is that? And those contacts, they put these things in your eyes and they hurt.
This was pre-plastic, malleable contacts. These were glass contacts.
Yeah.
Painted.
And they would have me, in the original scene where I'm coming up the stairs after Roddy and Bill, they had two contacts in. And I'd start to go up the stairs and I'd trip. Because I couldn't see, they didn't have any way for me to see. So they finally had to take one out. So I've got one eye that's way up here and then totally my regular one. But those things were a nightmare.
Don't you have a contact story?
Where they didn't sand?
Yeah, where they didn't sand it.
Yeah, so, and I have never worn contacts, that's the other thing. So it was a completely alien experience for me. And they forgot to sand the inside of one of these lenses. And again, when you're in a situation of a major motion picture like that and it's your first job, you don't want to rock the boat at all. I'm not a diva, believe it or not. No, so when this was happening and I was feeling this rubbing on my eyeball, I really was trying to hold it all together and think, okay, let's get through this. And then it just became so unbearable that they stopped and we took them out. And then the gentleman who was with us on the last show we did,
Steve Johnson, wasn't it?
Thank you. Said, oops. Oh, I understand what was happening, and thank goodness that I did speak up because it could have been real damaging.
Yeah, I had those same contacts, and they were supposed to sand them before they put them in. Well, no, I mean, they were like, you were a pretty good sport, because, you were in a scene, at least one, that your eyes were just, you had them like,
Blazing.
Yeah.
Blazing.
And it's really hard to open your eyes fully with those things. They're incredibly uncomfortable, but
it wasn't fun.
But they look good.
Question from the audience, right here in the black shirt.
A question for Chris. You made a pretty scary film before Fright Night called Sentinel. Yes.
Well, actually, the cast of the movie was pretty remarkable. Burgess Meredith, John Carradine, Ava Gardner, Jose Ferrer, Arthur Kennedy, Sylvia Miles, and I don't have one pleasant memory. Not because of any of the actors, but because the director was such a... Can I say the word dick? He was a horrible man. So it was not a pleasant experience. I'm glad that you find the movie enjoyable, and I've not looked at it since the day it was made. I nearly retired after that movie.
This is primarily for Amanda. I often see Amy dismissed as this damsel in distress, which as someone who identifies strongly with her as a teenager, I can go on for half an hour about why I think I'm with that. I wonder what your thoughts were.
Well, it is kind of funny over the years when, you know, the fact that she took she stood up for Amy as a vital character in the film, as opposed to just being the token, yes, sort of damsel in distress. So the first thing I have to say is there were times when, you know, the conversation would turn and I would say, you know, I was in a movie called Fright Night, and they'd say, "Who were you?" And I'd say I was the girl. Because there really was only one as a character, full character development. I never saw it that way. I was never treated that way. She was very much a part of the relationships to everyone in the film. I appreciate that. Really, there's an exception to this film, but for the most part, in a horror genre, that is the star. At some point, becomes the focus of the piece, is the genre of itself and the creation of the suspense and the thrill to the big reveals and so forth. The fact that we had so much humanity in our characters, so much development that accompanied the genre, I think is part of the success of the film as well. So thanks for that. I was just so thrilled to be a part of such a production, and it's just so wonderful to be able to have these occasions with you all, and it wouldn't happen without you all, that we still get to see each other and be together and love on it. So.
When you say that, when you mentioned earlier about the innocence of the movie, that really made when he took you over very powerful, because it was basically very symbolic of your loss of innocence.
Yeah, and that was in a room about the size of this forward platform, surrounded by probably 30 big burly grip guys, and I was not comfortable in terms of nudity. I was not going to do that, so my breasts were covered in duct tape, and again, the gentleman that Chris Sarandon is, when that moment came and that reveal came, he's looking at me with these big patches of duct tape on. And the look that he gives that I'm so beautiful, that's some acting. Seriously.
What she doesn't know is that I really think duct tape is hot. Just ask my wife.
Audience? Right here.
One of the things that I love about the story is that your character, as his, well, that's the thing, that it's unanswered what you're all about. And I hesitate to ask because I love the mystery of it. Can anyone speak to that at all?
The gentleman was asking me what I was. And I get that a lot. And I always say, well, when you run into Tom Holland, ask him. He's the writer. It never even occurred to me. I don't think I ever thought about it when we were doing our biography. It just never occurred to me what I was. Because I like horror films, but I'm not a big vampire film fan. So I don't know that stuff. And I think it was just whatever you want me to be. You know, whatever works for you is fine.
Questions? Go in the back there.
Yeah, Bearse go get the audio commentary. I was wondering if that special edition was in the Bearse at the time or not.
We did an audio commentary a few years ago, and he was wondering if there was a special edition coming out. Send all of your cards and letters to what? UA?
Sony.
Who is it? Sony who owns the movie now? Because they have steadfastly refused to do a commemorative edition with commentary. They've never offered to do it. Tom's hair is on fire. Tom Holland, because and in fact he organized this pirate commentary because they refused to do one. Yeah, so it's online.
Yeah, it's
Tom
on.
and me and were you in that?
Yeah.
And you guys were in
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
I was.
Just you know,
It's just like the sequel.
the girl.
Bitter and Angry Party too.
Did any of you keep any props from the production?
I had my tits for a really long time.
You sold them.
I actually, in a moment of desperation at one of these reunions, I did. I tried to do some kind of auction for them. It was funny. They went for a little bit, and because I was younger then and less buxom, and some of you have actually commented on this this go round that how did that transformation happen? Because all of a sudden I had breasts. Because you know I do sort of take my shirt off at the beginning of the film, and she looks kind of young and yes, nubile. And so they, back in the day, there was no CGI. I showed up at 4 o'clock in the morning to some kind of warehouse where I took my shirt off and they plastered me all over, and it was cold, so that added an element. You can use your imaginations. And then, yes, it's, I don't know if you can hear Chris's comments, but they're interesting. Anyway, he was paying attention. And, but anyway, they got added to the end, and somehow they gave them to me, and they ended up in a See's candy box for decades. And I was moving, and I found them, and I ended up bringing them to a show, and I sold them. I wish I had my fangs. I had 3 sets of contacts and 3 sets of fangs. And they were kind of hot, really, truly. I wish I had those.
I was sitting next to her, and it was a nice rack that she was selling. And I remember she was getting bids on it.
Rack of ages. I didn't keep anything that I recall. Oh, yes, I did, actually. We all got Guy McElwain, who was the head of the studio that made the picture at the time, gave us all, at either the opening or somewhere, a coffin, a box that looks like a coffin, with a cross and a stake. And on the outside of it, there's a logo that says Fright Night and the date. And I still have that, but it's not a prop from the movie. But I keep thinking that someday it'll be worth $1 million. No.
I still have the at the end of the melting scene that skull that crosses down the thing. And I grabbed that because I don't know, I just thought it was cool, so I grabbed it. And now it's sitting somewhere in my completely messy garage. And Tom usually calls me up once a month and says, "You do Tom's voice, you do it so well."
Hey, Jonathan, it's Tom. Listen, you still have that, oh Christ, what's the word? Hey, Christ, a skull. A skull that bounced off the thing. Call me.
But I just tell Tom, no, I don't want you in my garage, Tom.
Did you keep anything?
I still have my upper fangs.
I believe, good question?
Yeah. Did you see the remake, and what were your thoughts about it?
What are you talking about, the new one?
Yes.
He's in it.
The only remake, Chris. It's the only remake.
They kept insisting that it wasn't a remake, that it was a reimagining, which I think is a good way of describing it, by the way, because it follows this basic spine of the story, but it's rethought in a lot of different directions. I was in it briefly. They called me and asked me if I would like to do something and sent me the script. They said, "What do you want to do? These are the roles that are already cast." And I said, "Oh, I think it would be cool if I was the guy who gets eaten by him." Because it sort of is the passing of the torch. Yeah, right, closure. And I thought they did a pretty good job. It's not the original, and they didn't set out to make the original. So I appreciated their efforts, and I thought they did a nice job. I know a lot of people were very offended, fans particularly, and you can't take it that seriously, quite frankly. I mean, I know that there are a lot of people who love the original, and I'm more than appreciative of that. That's why we're here. But you know, why not? What the heck? And by the way, they were all huge fans of the original. This was not made from purely commercial, from commercial considerations. Colin Farrell, for instance, told me that he had watched the movie 50 times when he was a kid, and loved it, and was very nervous meeting me, in fact.
Yeah, I think as a standalone horror movie, it was very well done. I'm personally delighted, though, that even though it has come out, that we were still able to find our way to do these things with you all. That it didn't lessen the appeal of the original film.
Well, when I saw it, I said to Billy, I said, let's go have lunch and go see it together. So we couldn't find any theaters. There was one theater in Burbank, and we went in and we were the only two people in the movie. So I figured, well, this is probably not doing so well. But when Chris came on, we just howled.
And they literally howled.
I was not enthused by the idea of remaking it. I didn't understand why they were doing it, but you know, that's the people who own movies do that. So you know, they did it. And the hardest part for me, the weirdest part for me was because even though they reimagined the movie, the logo and everything was exactly as it was for me 25 years ago. So I was driving around LA, and Fright Night was on buses and on billboards and in magazines, and it was just like, what? You know, this is weird. It's like, you know, you sort of dreamed it or something. But yeah, it was.
But the thing that really, the bottom line is they you know, they can say reimagining or whatever. They're just doing it again to squeeze a few bucks out of it. And I think that they probably did, even though it didn't do well. Horror movies always make money with streaming and DVD and whatever and foreign sales. So, you know, they're just corporations now, and they're just making money.
Steven, did you have any thoughts?
I saw the first 20 minutes, and what are you guys doing? And, I'm actually not a huge horror movie fan, but I'll probably go back and check it out.
My question is also regarding the remake. What did you guys think of the very Chris Angel-esque Peter Vincent?
Yeah, what you guys thought of
That was an interesting choice. You can't possibly find another Roddy McDowall. And as Chris spoke to earlier, we had, and he knew that he was a B actor. He was an A-list person. But he made a lot of B films. And so to have a B-class actor playing a B-class actor, you know, that was just remarkable. And so there's no way to, very difficult to even, you know, reimagine that. I thought it was an interesting choice. My daughter's a big Doctor Who fan. And again, the storyline was there, the names were there, but I thought it was interesting that they set it in Vegas too. I mean, there were some interesting choices that they made. It was just more of a one-note film. It just didn't have the levels, to me, that that this piece did.
I read the script early on, and I liked the script a lot. I thought it was really, it brought in updates, you know, like you would want it to do, you know, like the housing bust in Vegas, you know, all these empty neighborhoods, and you can't really use a TV host anymore as a, you know, because it doesn't really exist anymore, you know, in any sort of widely acknowledged form. You know, in the old days, TV, you know, local guys were much more of a presence on TV, and now it's all sort of, network feed and stuff like that. So that wouldn't have translated quite as well to have a local guy doing it. And plus, those movies are not as common as they were. And so I like the Criss Angel, take on it, and the fact that he was sort of dissolute and all of that. But for some reason it didn't translate on the screen.
I liked the character better when I first saw it in Arthur. That's what it really reminded me of. I mean, it did, the guy's always drunk and silly. I didn't like that character at all. And I think they were all terrific actors. And it was an excellent cast. But I just thought this guy did it.
I also want to say something about Evil Ed. The guy who played Evil Ed. I don't remember his name. Who was the actor? What's that?
Lovin'.
Yeah, Big Lovin'. Yeah, that guy. That's the one. Thank you. There was kind of a nastiness to him, and that immediately made me not. Stephen's portrayal was so human and vulnerable and great, And that's really important. You realize that, I guess, when you do it a second time. You realize how important that is. And when the guy is nasty and kind of unlikable, you can't invest as an audience. You just don't care.
I'm sure there are some other questions about the original Fright Night.
No. I want to finish this. I want to deal with this here.
Question. It seems back to me then, there was no CGI.
Can you speak up?
There was no CGI back then. How long did it take to do those prosthetics and stuff like that? I mean, and who did them?
Richard Edlund, Steve Johnson, and then
Ken Diaz was the guy.
Kenny was the actual executor, the makeup artist. They were all done literally. I mean, there was literally a bat on wires that flew across the set. The makeup, everybody can speak to their own makeup process, because I know that you had
I had it easy relative to the transitions that Chris and Stephen. My final look was with the big mouth was about 6 hours in the chair. And I only had to do it a couple of times, because you can't focus on such an exaggerated look like that and not have it turn goofy funny. Tom used it very judiciously, and as he spoke to the last go around when he was with us, that got pulled on him at the last minute, I think, which I didn't know about at the time, that they wanted to put that grotesqueness into the film and the way it looked, and he didn't like it, and because of that reason it could turn against you, and it's a split-second thing, but it was worth the 1 second that it worked.
Most of my makeup stuff was at the end of the movie. I had a couple of sequences where there were some sort of heightened things, but the basic sort of end scene where they're in the basement and Jerry Dandridge is in full Nosferatu makeup, which is what it was patterned after. The original Nosferatu by Murnau that Tom, did on purpose. That took 8 hours. I'd come in at 4 o'clock in the morning and I'd go to work at noon. And work, sort of a normal day, and then the next I'd go home, and the next day I'd get up at 3:30 or 3 o'clock and go in, and Kenny Diaz slept in the makeup trailer in a little cubby hole up on top, and when you came in the morning, you'd walk in and you'd say, Kenny? Kenny? And suddenly you'd hear, whoa, we're in the water! And he'd pull out a bottle of rum, pour it into a glass, and he'd go to work for 8 hours. And one of the great things was I come from, a lot of us do, come from the theater, and so we're used to doing our own makeup. So I said, look, I'm going to go mad if I have to sit here for 8 hours and do nothing. So give me something to do. And so they let me, how Jerry's fingers were long, very long. So once they applied my fingers, then I was allowed to do the blending and the coloring on the hands. So I did that while they were working on the face and the ears and the eyes and the head and the thing and the thing. Yeah, so it was it's pretty excruciating, but the end result was great.
Yeah, for me, the cross doohickey thing took about like 4 hours, and the transformation from having the stake put in me and turning back into human, it was just torture. I mean, it was so many hours, but the thing that from the very beginning when I met these special effects guys, their enthusiasm for what they do and their ability, it just fascinated me. It was so fun, to see what these guys were doing and creating, and it really was interesting to watch. Not so much to be their guinea pig, but what the heck, when you see the finished product, it's definitely well worth it.
Just two quick stories about me. When they shot me in the head and then they put the stake in my heart, they were doing the reverse shot, and I had the stake and the blood coming down like this, and all of a sudden it's like, lunch! And I'm like, guys, I have a steak. No, we can't take it out. It takes too long. So I'm sitting at the cafeteria at Culver Studios trying to eat, have something come out like this, and you're trying to use a fork and spoon. And then in the melting thing, I did some of the melting, but then they shot a plate, a reverse plate, and I was in front of a green screen. Which they shot about a month later after everything wrapped, and they had me come down to this warehouse in Santa Monica. And I stand in front of the green screen for 4 hours. The green slime, the blood, which is I think Caro syrup. It's so sticky and horrible. And I did it for 4 hours, and I'm covered in this stuff. And I said, guys, okay. They said, that's good. I said, okay, just show me where the shower is. And like, oh man, our plumbing's not working. And I'm like, seriously? I have to drive home like this? So I get in the car and I start driving along the Santa Monica freeway. And I'm like, I need to get gas. I'm not going to make it home. And so I pull into a place, I'm not going to self-service, so I pull into a place and there was some guy comes out, and when he looked at me, he turned white, he gave me the gas, but I'm sure when I left, I saw him on the phone, I'm sure he was calling the cops.
This guy's hurt bad.
Just one quick sidelight about this guy, Kenny Diaz, that we're talking about. Kenny used to carry around a huge book. And I never knew what it was until one day I said, Kenny, what is it? And he said, oh, yeah, this is the most amazing book. You should see this book. This book is amazing. And it was called Forensic Medicine. And it was photographs of car wrecks, people who had been in car wrecks. And Kenny would carry this book around, but he would open it up and he'd go, oh man, look at this one. This was a good one. Boy, this one's going to really work. I mean, and he loved it, but loved it in a
aesthetic sort of way. It was a coroner's like textbook, and it was as big as a phone book, and there were different categories. There were test pilot photos, which all of it was just horrible and horrible stuff, and he loved it. He drank it up, so to speak. But my makeup obviously was pretty quick. But I remember one day Chris had done his 8 hours in the chair, and then one of the producers came up, or Tom or somebody came up and said, we're not going to get to that scene today. We're just not going to get to that scene. So he had done all of it. And this is like maybe 4 in the afternoon. This is after 12 hours, 8 hours of makeup and then waiting around for 4 hours. And they said that we're not going to be able to do it. And Chris said, okay. Turned around and took it off. It was amazing. I would have gone through the roof, but he didn't. His will had been broken by that point.
My will had been broken. One just semi-humorous sidelight. There were times when I had to wear the fingers without the major makeup, just the fingers. And we had a wardrobe guy. Do you remember his name?
Schwartz.
John?
No, Maury Schwartz. Maury Schwartz.
Maury was a little light in the loafers, and Maury, and you can imagine the difficulty with these rubber fingers going to the bathroom. And Maury would constantly offer to take me.
Me too. That was weird because
You offered to take me once, so I don't know.
Actually, didn't you guys just take each other?
I took you last time. You take me this time.
Yeah. No, I said to Maury, thank you. No, I'll just use a coat hanger.
Does Steven ever get tired of saying "You're so cool, Brewster"?
I did about 27 years ago.
All right.
Would each of you be able to explain your favorite scene from the film?
Favorite scene.
Each of you.
Does somebody else have one immediately? Because I've got to think of, you do?
My favorite scene in the is his transformation, his Evil Ed's transformation.
Sorry, I thought
He was. I just thought it was so brilliantly done, not just from the standpoint of the makeup effects, but also Steven's performance and Roddy's performance. Because Roddy's reactions to the transformation are just as important as what's going on at the other end of the screen.
Yeah, I don't really remember seeing him react when I was actually doing it, but when I saw the movie for the first time, it just, I was so impressed with what Roddy did and surprised, and it was beautiful. I mean, he was awesome.
I have favorite takes that the actors all do. You know, I mean, once you watch it 50 or 60 times, you know, you sort of see, you still see things that are, you know, you didn't see before. But one of my favorite scenes, and probably because when we did it, was when we all get together in Jerry's house, you know, for the confrontation and everything. Because they had built this set, that house, inside of the soundstage, and the detail was just, you could walk around and just look at the detail of it for forever. And all being there, and, you know, after bonding and all that stuff, being able to actually work together in a scene was a lot of fun too. But my favorite part from that scene is when after Chris drinks the holy water, and I think they asked Charlie, you know, are you satisfied? And he says yes or something. And Chris has this little 1950s sitcom dad moment where he goes, well, I'm glad that's all over. It's just it's so out of place and wonderful that it's, I love it. I giggle even before it happens now.
I don't know if it's, I agree in the overall picture, the scene with Steven and Roddy, because also when you're in a horror genre film, you're acting in we were lucky that we had scenes with human beings, but you're also acting against an imagination of what you think you're experiencing or what it looks like. And I imagine that Roddy was doing that a good bit, because Steven's transformation was a very technical, time-consuming thing. So, you know, he's acting in a real as-if situation. I guess one of the moments that, if there's a moment that I go, oh, it's the mirror dancing. Well, it's not in a good way. It was the weirdest thing to do, and it's still, I guess, I project my feelings internally with that, because it just is just so crazy strange. So every time that moment comes up when I've seen the film, I just go, oh, okay.
Oh, I have one other, and that's when Jerry enlists Ed, when he takes the coat and brings it around. Because, and for the very reason that we're talking about, one of the reasons why we enjoyed working on the movie was because it was such a human moment. It was about this lonely boy and this man who understood his loneliness and was saying, I'm going to make everything okay. Daddy's going to make everything okay. And it was a very bittersweet sort of, you know what's going to happen on the one hand, but at the same time you are enveloped in the moment because it's such it has such an emotional value to it.
My favorite, I think, was the scene we did with you and I and Art Evans. And Art was very funny, and he was, yeah, and there was one thing about Billy. I became friends with Billy, and I really loved being intimidating to him. So every scene we had together, if I could be intimidating to him, I always enjoyed that part. I relished that. And then when we were doing the stuff, I kind of improvised the cross and everything like that, because I really thought, you know, if you're trying to throw somebody off the track, you don't play evil, you play really nice and fine and okay. But that scene was really fun for me.
That was fun. Yeah.
Nice guy. Great.
Well, I'm Neal Jones. Let's hear it for the cast of Fright Night.